Good afternoon, good morning, or good day, wherever you are. My name is Kevin Porman. I'm a developer advocate here at Salesforce.com, and I have with me today for this very special codeLive a developer who works on our nonprofit side. I want to introduce you. Her name's Jennifer Bennett, and she can say a little bit more about the work she does. But she comes highly recommended to me. If you remember, a few weeks ago, we had Beth Bresnes on, and afterwards, she was like, "You know, you should have on. You should get Jennifer. She's awesome." And so here we have Jennifer. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about mocking and stubbing, specifically the Stub Provider, and be building out something that we can use to do stubs a little bit more easily, a little bit more fluidly. So Jennifer, you want to say something about yourself?
Sure. So as you mentioned, my name is Jennifer Bennett. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem since 2012. I started out as a Salesforce admin, loved Salesforce, turned to development, and learned everything I could through the community. I became a Rad Women coach and then started working for Salesforce.org, which is, like you said, now the nonprofit side of Salesforce.com. And I work with Beth. So we're co-workers on the same team. She's also very amazing, as everybody is on our team. And we work on the program management module and case management. Both are apps for Salesforce.
Cool.
Untitled Salesforce.
I always like to explain any names, titles, organizations that we have mentioned in case somebody's like, what's that? So you heard her mention Rad Women. Rad Women is an organization that helps women who are in the Salesforce ecosystem who want to learn to become a developer. So you can sign up with the Rad Women. There's a 10-week group, 10-week of an hour a week of live sessions, and they'll help you learn to become a Salesforce developer. So today our topic is mocking and stubbing. Now we all know what mocking is. That's what politicians do to one another. But do you want to say a word about what stubbing is?
Yeah, so stubbing is basically, I guess what they're called is test doubles, right? So when you don't want to use, when we talk about like dependency injection, where your code is dependent on something else and you don't want that dependency to kind of interfere with your tests of the class that you're testing, stubbing is a way of just providing like a stand-in or a test double to maybe do some of the responses and things that you want, or to just not do anything, but just, avoid calling your actual class. That way, if anything happens to the class you're dependent on, like something breaks in there, your tests don't break on the class that you're particularly testing in. It's kind of separates those.
So it's a way of creating a fake object that reacts in a way that you programmatically say without relying on the actual object of that name.
Yes.
And it helps you isolate your tests so that you're writing true unit tests, not integration tests. And the key examples I like to use is if you think about the multi-layer architecture, you may have some code in like an account service layer, and it turns out that you're writing a test for your account object, account wrapper, and you want to test something in there that also relies on the account service layer. Now you can either write that integration test so that it goes and calls the account service layer and does the normal work that the account service layer does before coming back to you, or you can stub that out saying, whenever I call this method on the account service layer, always give me back this response, and bypass the account service layer entirely for your tests. So they are incredibly useful. I've gone ahead and created a testing recipes folder in Apex recipes. And I was a little like, do I put this there? Do I put it in the test folder? I'm going to put it here in the testing recipes in the classes here so that we can look at creating a stub provider that implements the stub provider interface that Salesforce gives us, but also turn around and make it a bit more user friendly. But we are going to turn around and mark it especially as a test method. So let's go ahead and create a test class, or excuse me, a class. And what do we want to call this? Do we test double, faker, fake object, stubber, stub?
We could fake pecs, fake apex.
Fake pecs? I like that.
Yeah, I'm not good.
Fake pecs it is. Yeah. Well, that's not terribly descriptive for this. Let's actually be. I'm going to use test double.
There you
I
go.
like fake pecs, but this is. I want to be explicit as to what we're doing here. So we'll take it out of our tests and we'll put it into our classes folder under the testing. Of course, I started scrolling the wrong way. That's the way this happens, right? Testing recipes. Okay. So because we only want to use test doubles or stubs in the context of a test, the first thing we can do is safely mark this as @isTest. Now, this is a trick I like to do. Even though I don't have unit tests in here, by marking it as isTest, that means that nobody can call this code outside the context of a test, which means anything in here doesn't count against our Apex limits, and it doesn't count against code coverage. And again, we can only use this in the context of a test. So I really appreciate that, being able to tag that, even though I don't have actual tests in here. Now, Jennifer, how do we go about implementing that Stub Provider method, the Stub Provider interface that Salesforce provides?
Well, the typical path would be in your test class itself, right? So if you look at the docs, the Stub Provider, you would just, yeah. Let's look at that example, because
Stub Provider interface. All right. So this is important to, the official definition of what this is I'm going to read it verbatim. Stub Provider is a callback interface that you can use as part of the Apex Stub API to implement a mocking framework. Use this interface with test.createStub method to create a stubbed Apex object for testing. That was awfully dense. Let's try and unpack this a little bit by looking at what we've got in terms of the methods and things that we have to do. So we only have this one method. Is it just one method? Handle method call?
that's it.
That's it? That's it.
That's
so
it. Yep.
Our code here, we've got to implements stub system dot stub provider. I've never tried this. Do we actually have to put system dot there, or can we just do stub provider?
I don't believe you do.
Oh.
I think it's just if you want to be explicit.
That's cool. All right. Great. So now we've got a class here. If I were to try and save this, and I'm just going to trigger it, you'll see it come back up and say, no, because we haven't implemented that method. So if we go back to the docs, this is one of the great parts about the docs. We can actually just look at this method here and copy this, the signature, over and start filling it out. Which got really long real quick, so I'm going to break that up. And how would we go? What would you do if you were starting to build this? What would you do to start filling this out? Because we want to build something that we can use to implement a stub for just about any class without it being tied to a specific class. And that sort of generic bit is the tricky bit, and the part that makes this, what we're trying to do here, really useful. Because normally you would implement this stub provider tied to a specific object type. So you would have like account stub provider that would provide you a stubbed account. Or if you had, my business process dot stub provider. How do we make this generic is my big question.
So I think the biggest thing is we would just need to track we'd want to track like the method calls themselves, right? So right now we're saying handle method call. When you think of a stub provider, you want to, like you said, you want to be able to tell it what to do, right? So if I call this service, I want it to return something to me, right? So a particular method that you call, and then you expect a return value. And then typically on the flip side, you also want to be able to say, well, if my service throws an exception, I want to make sure that my class is handling that okay. So a lot of times what you want to do with a stub provider is track what you want to return for a particular method and whether or not you want to throw an exception for a particular method. So I think what we need to do is have like a wrapper around method call so that we can say when this particular method is called, I want to either return this or I want to throw an exception.
Okay. How do you suggest we do that? I'm going to point out you get to type too.
Okay. So yeah.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Type.
Okay. Type. Okay. So I would do something like public class method call. And then
so we're going to accept the string. Oh, this is an inner class.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually not going to. We'll just do. I'm trying to think of how I would.
I think you probably want to do that.
Yeah. Thanks.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, you know.
Fixing small typos. It's what I do for a living. All you have to do is watch me type, and then you'll understand just how true that is.
All right. Yeah, I started doing the constructor right away instead of the outer class because, you know, typing while people watch you is just always nerve-wracking for me. Let's see. I remember like starting to pair program. I'd always get so nervous about pair programming. Beth is actually a really huge fan of it, and it's grown on me now, but I still get nervous. I get nervous about making mistakes, so I make mistakes.
You know, I came to Salesforce development from a PHP and Ruby background, where my first job out of college when I was working at a PHP and then later Ruby shop, and pair programming was everywhere. You did it all the time. And then as soon as I got into the Salesforce ecosystem, it was very much this like, what's pair programming? That's weird. Why would you do that? It seems inefficient to have two people working on the same thing at the same time. And it's always been something that I really appreciate. And so I'm glad to know that we can sort of get it growing in the Salesforce ecosystem. So this is interesting. We get a method call class that we can construct in various ways that is going to be our input to the outer class.
Yeah. So when we construct this the test double, we're going to ask the test double to track certain method calls, and then when those calls are made to do these particular things. And then when we handle the method call, we're going to go look for an existing method and do what it says, right?
I like it.
Cool. And then I just threw in like count calls, right? So that we could do something at the end to say, hey, assert that these calls were actually called. Or maybe you wanted to, kind of keep evolving this and say, well, it should have been called twice or something like that. But
okay.
So I figure method name is definitely required. We could jump into like, well, what about like method
like
overloading, right?
Yeah, method overloading in the signature.
The signature and stuff, but I figure for today we'll just keep it simple and assume that all of our methods are just by name, callable or findable by name.
Yeah, again, this is when we write code for codeLive and in Apex recipes, we oftentimes will do sort of like the proof of concept, demonstrate how a concept works on live, and then there's a delay between what we do live showing up in the GitHub repo. And that's because I go and I document it and I clean it up and, make it more functional. But don't think that this is the only thing you could do. You could definitely handle things like method overloading and that sort of thing. So this is, you're gonna set the return value. Do we also need the object method name? I think we also need the method name, yeah.
I was thinking method name is like totally required, right? So throw that in the constructor, but
Oh, okay. Yeah. I see what you're saying. So you're going to return the same object. That's an interesting use of constructors. Well, actually, a constructor, this is going to return a brand new object, isn't it?
yeah, so we're gonna actually when we create the stub, we'll add method calls or when we create the test double, we'll add method calls to the test double. And then the handle method call will actually look for those tracked method calls. So like up here, we'll have something like.
Yeah, and I just saw that because at first I thought this was a constructor, but then I realized that you've got method call there. So you're going to be returning the same object that you're interacting with. I get it.
Yeah,
I get it now. It took me a second. This is the joy of pair programming. You learn other styles and methods of developing like that. I wouldn't necessarily have thought to use that style, but I really like that.
Yeah, and the reason I kind of did it this way is because sometimes I really like chaining method. I think it's fun. I think it's pretty. I think it's really clear and easy to read. But sometimes you don't need to really set a return value. Like a method might not return anything. So if it just returns null, which is what it is by default, then you don't even need to call that, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. While you type there, I'm going to fix a couple of issues we've got in terms of trying to I just branched earlier today and have caused a little bit of an issue with trying to deploy that back to a scratch org. So that happened.
And I've done that.
Yep. So you're going to have this one. So we've got it set up so you can create the method call object with just the method name. You can set the return value. You can set the throw an exception. We need exception type, exception message. Okay. Let's see if we got
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Just
anybody saying anything fun, snarky, snide in the chat here. I got one person is telling specifically you, Jennifer, that they're looking at their second screen, so don't worry about typos. All
right, let's see here. So now we just need to do the handle, right?
Yeah. Well, I've got that up here, but it's external to your method call class.
Right. So actually handling when the method gets called.
Gotcha.
Sorry, public void. I don't know. Naming's hard, right? I don't know. It's like one of the hardest things. So I will say like if. So first we want to just set 0.
So when we do that counter, this is to give a little bit of an explanation here. If you've ever done sort of behavioral driven development rather than test driven development, the names are a little confusing because behavioral driven development is a style of test driven development, but instead of writing unit tests, you write behavior driven tests. And the idea with the behavior driven test is that you're going to be able to say, I expect not 1 to equal 2 or A to equal B, but to say, I expect this method to have been called 3 times. Or I expect this method to not have been called, or to have been called 0 times. And so by putting that count calls in there, we have the ability to say, not only did I expect this stub to have been activated, I expect it to have activated twice, and I can make sure that my code isn't creating this object and running through that method again multiple times. So that's a really cool like little way to be able to insert that behavioral test as well. And somebody's asking here, why not get the exception instance itself versus just the message? The reason we do that there is because that way we can control the style and type of message rather than it being from wherever. If we grab the exception from, I don't know, the account service layer, writing that unit test where we're using this could be more difficult rather than just looking for the exception message. We can always be type safe and know that it's going to be one of these test double exceptions. Yeah.
I always forget how to do that.
Yeah. Again, I'm here for you to fix the
Thanks.
Fix the small typos. I'm going to do this though. I'm going to move our test double exception to the top of this file because that's the way we do it in this repo.
Nice.
You've created this list
why
up here. Go ahead.
Yes. I was just going to say, why the squiggly, red squiggly unexpected token extends?
Yeah.
Did I do that
because
wrong?
It's public class.
Oh, yes. I forgot a word.
There we go.
There we go. I knew there was something wrong.
This is the joy of pair programming because we can just fix this. So you created this method calls. Okay. Tell me, this is going to store a list of method calls that we want this stub instance to handle?
Yeah, and then we're also going to track what object or what type object type we're going to be stubbing, right? So that we can actually create the stub from this class.
Gotcha. And so this is going to be the token for either the S object or the Apex name of the class.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And, you know, I got to tell you, I've actually never used a stub provider to stub out like an S object. So that's an interesting thought.
Yeah, usually just I don't think I have either.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll get our object type. That object type is probably the bare minimum to create one of these.
Yeah, so I'm going to just toss it in the constructor again since it's kind of required, right?
Yep. I'm liking this.
And then we need a mechanism for adding the method calls that we want to write or want to track, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's see.
Are we going to add it in sort of that fluid interface style, or are we going to just handle it in the handle method call object?
Let's see. Not sure I cracked your question.
That's fair. That's fair. Talk to me about what you're thinking right now.
I'm thinking about adding the the methods to be tracked. So I need to why am I having I'm having one of those brain fart moments, right? Where I just can't think of what it is that I'm trying to do here.
So we want to be able to add to this list the method calls. So how about track method?
Yes.
Names are hard. We're going to want to be able to, we're going to have to take and handle, we don't want a method call object, right? Is that what you're thinking? Handling one of these?
Yeah, we want to, yes, I think we just want to have them pass that in, right? So we just have them create a method call and then, there we go. And I think that's void, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Well, we could do void, or we could return itself if we wanted to track multiple methods, and you could just keep chaining that, but either way.
So just public test double?
Yeah, and then just...
Yeah, I like that. We could also, for grins and giggles, do
Yeah.
I noticed you do a line return before the return statement. What's the thinking?
I I think it looks prettier. It's kind of cleaner, like a break.
That's totally fair. That's totally fair. I do a lot because
Yeah.
I think that a lot of formatting because I think it looks pretty. Okay, so we've got ways to get lists or to get methods into our list of methods that we want to track and handle. And then how do we actually process them? How do we actually do the work of...
Well, I think we need one more method, right? So we need to be able to return the stub provider, right? When we're all done. Or do you want to go into the handle method? We can go into the handle method.
No, we're going to return the stub provider.
Yeah. So once we track all the methods, then we'll return the stub provider that we can then populate into our whatever it is we're stubbing out.
Okay.
Right, our service or whatever.
Yep. So how would you go about doing
Something
that?
in like. So what did you keep system or get rid of it? We'll be consistent.
I got rid of it, but somebody did point out that if you don't put system there, then you might accidentally be invoking another class you've created if you've got your own class named Stub Provider, because Apex is cool that way.
Yep. Yeah, so, people have actually run into that because they create a class called test, and then they try to do like test that star test, right? Like that's like super common.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and put system back in there.
Cool. It's probably best practice, right?
Yeah.
So
plus it turns out that lovely pink and underlines it.
I'm going to say generate. I don't know. Naming's hard. Back on that again. Oh, it doesn't like that because it's like a reserved word. We'll just...
No. It's totally fine with generate. It was saying that you can't have an empty body to the method.
Oh, it's giving me a warning ahead of time. I see.
Yeah.
All right. We'll leave it that then, and then we will. So, what's the signature for creating a stub provider again? Do you still have that doc pulled up?
Yeah, I still have the docs pulled up. So, creating a stub provider is create stub. And let me just pull that document up. Yeah, this is what it looks like. So we can call, if I can highlight the right thing, this is what it wants.
All right, so I'm getting confused again here. Create stub. Oh. Do we just do... And then we pass in the object. No.
No, I think we wanted to just call create stub.
Yep. And then the object type. And, oh. The stub provider. Okay. Now, yeah. So get rid of new. Wait. This. Yes. No.
It's actually.
Sorry, Kevin.
It's you're fine. You're fine. I think this is. I think what's going on is that what we need to do is make this test because it's part of the test.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is going to be our object type. I like to do this. To make it explicit.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, it's, I don't know. And then I think we want this object, right? So this?
Yep.
I like it.
Cool.
So that's going to give us, in our test, we can call this method to give us the actual object we want. But our yeah, it's gonna be an object.
And then we cast it. Yeah, we cast it to the type.
So
yeah. Going on, I use the docs a lot more than I'm trying to do here. So it's like I feel like I'm frozen to the VS Code screen, and I don't switch to Chrome and do my little searching on the side like I normally do because I forget all the syntax.
So I totally cheat and open a Chrome window here in my Visual Studio Code, and then I open up the docs there.
Nice.
Yeah, it's
I'll have to try
totally cheating. You know, better coding through cheating. It's like better learning through chemistry.
There's no cheating in coding.
Exactly.
The whole thing is coming up with best practices, and if we don't share and reuse them, then what's the point, right?
So I'm gonna go with best practice means always having your docs handy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we have our empty body here, which is why that's yellow, right? Ooh, I really wanted to tab me.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're in. Thanks. We're in handle method call. So we have, I guess we need to actually, well, I don't know that we actually need to track anything. So this is the,
well, we need a,
all right, we're going to iterate our method calls, right? To find out which call it is.
Yep. Nice.
And then we can say if these are all public, right? They're not explicit, but
yep.
We'll probably just, to avoid worrying about whether or not when you track your method that you watch capitalization, we'll just lowercase, because Apex doesn't care about case anyways. Oop. That's switching between JavaScript and Apex with the triple equals. But
yeah.
So if method call equals stubbed method name, then method call dot handle. What did we say? Handle call? Yes.
Yeah. So
and we're gonna return that.
Angika, the name of that plugin for Visual Studio Code is called Browser Preview. It is both blindingly obvious as to what it does and generic enough to make it hard to search for when you Google it, but it is called Browser Preview.
Perfect. Taking a note of that myself. Okay, illegal.
Okay, so we're gonna handle it. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's my handle call here. If I didn't finish writing that out.
Yeah.
So otherwise we're going to, if not throwing an exception, we're going to just return the return value.
Yeah. So basically what we're doing is we're saying, can I iterate through all of the tracked methods? And when we get to the one that is currently applicable, because it was just called, our handle method function method will go ahead and return whatever value we've specified as the return value or the exception we've specified as the return exception.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I'm liking this.
So it doesn't like some yellow squigglies. I'm going to try to annoy. Squigglies is like a call to action for me. Like,
yeah. Throws exception.
Oh,
was misspelled.
More typos.
Yeah.
Yeah, exception message instead of method. Yep.
So one of the other extensions I use and sort of live and breathe by is something called tab 9. And tab 9 is great. It uses, the marketing of it says it uses artificial intelligence to understand your code better and provide you better IntelliSense options. Whatever. It gives me better options for skipping typos by auto-completing method names, object names, property names, that sort of stuff for me. And we do still have the issue with the flow and the app menu. And we're going to create a new scratch org to deal with that. So we'll create a new scratch org, call it Apex Recipes, make it 30 days. Okay. And then
I think if we get here, we're just going to, where do we go?
Oh, here we go.
We're just going to
Return null. Okay. So this is sort of our failsafe.
That means we didn't find a match. Yeah, yeah.
Do we want to return null, or do we want to throw an exception?
No, because we might not be
actually
handling every.
It shouldn't mock it if it's not in there.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's fine. We'll return null for now. So the way we've got this set up,
I think you have to, right? Because like if you're in a for loop and you do a return and an if, isn't the compiler going to yell at you if you don't have some kind of return value outside of your loop?
Yeah. What does this one say? Why do we have a avoid long parameter list? Thank you, PMD.
Mm-hmm.
I love it when PMD gives me a warning on something I have no control over, like the method from, yeah, anyway. So just as a recap as to what we're working on the Stub Provider and creating a better interface for creating stubs. To do so, we've got our test double class, which is another way of saying a stub class, and we've got an inner class down here called method call, and we'll be creating method call objects to handle both, not only the name but also the return value or the return exception. And then we've got a handle call method that actually implements returning that value for us. And we up here have the in our outer class, we've got a handle method call that is going to give us the ability to iterate over all of our method calls that we've predefined in order to say which one of these is the one we're currently working with that was just called, and then immediately return the value that we've pre-specified.
Yep, that sounds like a great recap. And then we did bring in that counter, right? Mm-hmm. So we could also add something like an assert, right, where we want to say, hey, not only did I want you to do these things, but I want you to assert that you did them, that you did what I asked you to do, right? So we could throw in something like that as well.
Or we could actually create something that stubs something and then demonstrate how this works. And I'm wondering if this is all very ethereal and high level. Let's actually concretely demonstrate it. Is where I'm leaning.
Yeah,
how do you think about that?
That sounds really good to me.
Okay, great. So to do so, let's first create a class that we can stub. So create an Apex class. I'm going to call this Stub Example class. Sure, Stub Example class is sort of implied. I'm going to put this, I put it in the wrong folder. I'll fix it later. Okay, so public stub example. We don't need that. Let's give it a couple properties just to have something to test with. So public string hello message, and then let's do public boolean, and then we'll do is true. We'll set this to false just to start with. I love naming things. It's hard. And then we have to create some methods here. So let's do public boolean get is true, and so just as a heads up, we're currently having a thunderstorm here and my power is flickering. So hopefully I'm not getting cut off. Hello? Did I get cut off? Jennifer, did I get cut off?
Oh, wow. There we are. I was like, uh-oh, did my internet die? It's super windy here today, so I thought maybe my internet something went down. I don't know.
I don't think it's your internet. I think we're having brownouts here because we're having terrible thunderstorms. So like I was just explaining that we're having thunderstorms and it's browning out, and then I'm like, oh wait, did I get cut off? Did I get cut off? And then finally you're like, oh, but we're back. I'm like, woohoo!
Yes. Yes. Welcome back.
All right. So we have a get is true method. I don't know why you would do that as a method instead of a hello instead of a property, but for grins and giggles, we'll do return. This is true. So do you think we can stub that?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right. So I'm going to save this, and then let's create a test class. To do that, I'm going to create a folder. I like organizing things in folders. So tests, and we'll create a...
So normally when I stub, I have a class that consumes the other class, right? So that you can set that property. So I think we need a class that uses your stub example class.
Okay. So we need something that's going to use this.
Yep.
Create a class. We'll call this stub example consumer. And we'll put it there for right now. And we're going to have this. It's going to need a stub example. And then we'll have our constructor take a stub example.
Perfect.
You need a method on here to actually write a test for.
Mm-hmm.
So public,
and that calls the stub is true, right?
This return this dot stub dot is get is true, like that, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And then now we can write a test that does this. So let's create another class. Stub test, stubbing, stub recipes. Is it stubbing? Did I say stubbing or stub? Stubbing recipes. I think I named it underscore test. Let's see. Nope, capital T. Oh, I lost it. I hate that. Stubbing recipes tests. I'll move that later. So this is going to be at is test, and then don't need that. My test I like to do private class stubbing recipes tests. All right, so how do we go about actually doing this now? Oh, by the way, so I also like to split the screen here so we can see the code we're testing and keep that going back and forth between the code we're testing and the test here. So in order to do this, we need to stub our stub example, right?
Yes. Yep. So first I would normally create the test double, right? So I would just do test double, stub test double.
All right, go for it.
I can't actually. It's connection lost. It keeps saying reconnecting to host.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to open up our test double class here. So we'll have our test double. Test double. And we need the object type. So the thing we're going to pass in here is
stub example dot class, right?
Example dot class. And you do that dot class to say you want the actual type, not an instance of stub example, for instance. So we got that there. So we've stubbed that.
And then what we want to do is create that method call, right? So that we want to track.
Yep. So method test double dot method call.
Mm-hmm. It says the host conditions are poor, or they no longer are connected. So,
I mean, okay.
Just it's fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the method, and then the method to track would be.
The method to track is going to be a new test double dot method call.
Yep, and by bare minimum, we need a method name. So,
which is, in our stub example, we called it get is true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we can call method to track dot return. What do we call it? How do we set that up?
With return value.
With return value.
Mm-hmm. And you could actually chain that right on the when you construct it as well, so you can.
Oh, let's do that. Dot with return value, and we'll say we'll do false. We'll do.
Should we do true, right? Because it's false by default.
Yeah, so we'll do with return true, false. We don't have an exception, and so I think that's what we need to do there. It's all we need to do. I'm gonna let it format this for me. Well, okay, fine, whatever. And you'll notice that it indented this for me. Well, the thing that's nice about chaining, if you've never seen this, it's also called a fluid interface sometimes, is that you can continue to do with throw exception, and you can pass in message here, and all that's valid. So you can have this, create the object, boom, 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 set it all up however you'd like. Obviously, we don't want to do that here. So we'll create that object, and then we can call test dot, or no, we just need to call generate, right? Because generate's going to call the.
So we first need to create a consumer class, right?
So we'll do stub example consumer equal consumer stub example consumer. That, and in this case we need a instance of stub, so we'll do stub.generate, I think. Doesn't like stub example. Oh yeah, so it looks new.
It's hard to see the code there, but are we in the constructor of the test class right now?
Kind of, maybe. Let's fix that. That is test. Static void.
Should return true.
Stub should return true. I like to also do positive, because this is a positive test.
Nice, yep.
And then I'm just going to move everything that I previously typed in the wrong spot into the right spot. And I'll save its little format. There we go.
Nice.
So we've got stub. This is saying, yes, I should have an assert. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep, and we can, and that's what we can assert then that when we call the consumer dot get is true, that it's true.
Just like that.
Mm-hmm.
Calling get is true on our consumer object with a stub should return true. There we go. I'll save that again. You know, we might actually have like a unit test that passes here demonstrating all this, and it not be like 90 seconds before the end of the stream.
That would be cool. We could also do like a second test where we're not using a stub provider, right? And then it returns false because it's false by default.
Uh-oh, failed to push. Error not found. That's true. So we may be dealing with some streaming issues. Let me my colleagues are telling me that the stream dropped at 10:40, which means that we will have the end of this on video on demand for running later, but we are definitely having some issues at the moment because of the power outage that we had.
Bummer.
So yeah, apologize for that.
No worries.
But we still have like 10 minutes, and so if we can get this to save here, we should be able to do that. While maybe I can fix this a little bit here. Yeah.
So obviously while you're fixing this, I mean, our examples are super contrived, right? Just to kind of drive home how this works. But I mean, in general, the biggest savings in my mind is avoiding DML and avoiding SOCL in your tests, right? Because you can fake that, you can mock that. So that's one of the coolest things about stubbing. And then another one that I really like that a colleague showed me the other day was like wrapping like the get date time, right? Because sometimes you need it to return a certain date time, and you can't really have Salesforce do that. So you can wrap date time and then stub that out and get different times coming back. So it kind of really drives that home where it's really useful to be using stubs and mocking.
I like it. I like it. All right, let's see if I can't fix my networking issues. Let's see if we can't get things working again. Because it definitely says we're still streaming. We're definitely recording, even though it's not streaming. So, yeah. I'm waiting to see if my... we've got our local internet provider has some issues with DNS, and so I run my own sort of like little local DNS clone, but it doesn't always fire up when the power goes out, and I think that's what happened here.
Gotcha.
So here we'll probably have to come back to this when we're going to have a second part to this. We're going to be working with a sort of fully fleshed out stubbing provider that you're working on for PMM, right?
Yes. We're currently working on, we've been playing around with stub providers, like frameworks for a while now, just kind of going back and forth and trying to simplify it as much as possible. So we're on like our third or fourth iteration now of that. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to playing with that some more.
And I think that's coming up basically a month from now. So tune in for a second part on this here in a month, where we'll have sort of a fully baked stub provider that we're going to walk through using in a better, less contrived way than we're currently doing right now. So I apologize for the issues we're having with the networking here, and hopefully this will save and we can run a test here. We've still got 5 minutes or so left. You remember when I said
you jinxed it by the 90s.
exactly,
yeah,
and like jinxed it, and then of course power fluctuations. So that's great. I need to make sure that
constructor not defined.
Constructor not defined.
Oh, you know what? We need to cast that back into a stub example.
Oh, here?
To the left of new, right? Wait, what is... I can't read your screen, sorry.
Yeah, no.
What is...
It's going to be, yeah, to the left of new. So it'll be...
I'm sorry. It's actually to the left of stub.generate. So...
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Yep. It's a little fuzzy on my end.
Okay, so This is going to be
it's going to be a stub example, right?
oh yeah. It's going to be the object we are stubbing. So this one up here, stub example.
Yeah, because we're returning an object, we have to cast it back until it again.
Yep. And this is sort of that sort of just-in-time casting that we need to be mindful of. Saving, and it's saved. Okay, so we could run this test. I'm just going to click the button. We'll see what happens. No auth information found for test. We just saved it. How does it not have auth information? Let's try that. No. Okay.
Developer console?
Yeah, let's just do open default org. Since we created a new org for this, I'll open it. It's the old one. I'll close it. Okay.
I will tell you, nothing works for me like first go around. So if this does, I'm going to drop the mic and call it a day.
Totally. Your cat disappeared.
She's still there.
Oh. What's the cat's name again?
My cat's name is Lovey.
Lovey, yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for...
When I'm standing, she sits in the back of the chair, so I always stand for meetings, so she's almost always in the back of a chair for every meeting.
Nice.
And then when I sit, she's on my lap. Yeah.
Nice. Come on, Chrome. There we go. That's better. All right. Wait for the various components to load.
Yeah.
Maybe. I've lost the developer console icons up in the top. Let's try reloading that one more time.
The demo gods are against us right now.
I know, right? Let's try switching apps. That'll reload the whole thing. Let's go to service. Oh no, it didn't reload it.
That is so weird. Can you get to it going into setup, then go to Apex class, and then open in developer console?
We'll find out. Actually.
Back arrow?
Yeah. There it goes.
Well, that works too.
Fine, allow. Okay. Thank you. Here we go. Developer console. We're coming down to the wire here. I should not have jinxed us. I apologize.
No, that's okay.
New run. We call this stub recipes test. There's our test. Run. Success. Attempt to dereference a null object. Okay, so we've got an issue. Let me see if I can't find it. Where? Okay. Attempt to dereference a null object. This is the... I hate this view. I need to be able to read it in log form. Okay, so Stub Provider. Method call is null. We never added it, did we?
Oh.
Yeah, we never added it. So stub dot
track. Yep.
Track method to track. Oh yeah, because we're returning null, so it's going to be a dereference to a null object. All right. And don't worry, it didn't work the first time, so we don't have to worry about the 4 horsemen in the end of days.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, let's try that again. Rerun. Okay. Testing. No, oh. We still have attempt to dereference a null object. Is it the same thing? Method call is null.
Did you
I thought I saved
do the
it.
new log or the old log? Yeah.
Save. Did I do the old log or the new? Oh, that's a good point. Okay, let's scroll down here. Line 89, column 1. Line 89.
Oh, throws exception. I didn't default to false up at the top, right there. Yeah.
I like to do this for set all of my properties explicitly.
Return value we want to be null, but
Yeah,
and method names are required.
So there we go. That's safer. That was a zeroed in on that one. Lightning speed.
I'm so familiar with attempting to dereference null objects. It's like,
What's your favorite exception?
I don't know that I have a favorite.
Mine used to be too many script statements, but then they got rid of that one, and when they brought in the CPU governor. But too many script statements was my go-to for a favorite. Hey, look at that.
How about internal Salesforce error?
Or have you ever been able to capture all of the seven dwarves? Oh, look at that.
Actually, you totally went black for a second,
Yeah,
and then came back.
We are at time, and
Cool.
so I'm going to say thank you for joining me, and we'll see you again here in about a month. Apologize for the networking issues then the thunderstorm that kicked us off, but we will have this on video on demand here shortly, hopefully. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you all again next Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Pacific. And thank you for tuning in.